Steve, hi, how you doing? Hope you're well. Like, subscribe, whatever you feel like doing. I'm not going to pressure you. It's up to you. Today I'm going to be talking about making an album. So this is the first phase. Maybe I'm a little bit over analytic, but maybe this will help you as well. About planning the album, thinking about what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. And I'm going to take this through week by week. I'm going to get to the release stage and talk about how I'm going to sort of promote it as well and what I'm going to do. So it's a bit of caveat. I am part of a company in the music industry that does distribution. So I'll be able to give a little bit of insight into that side of it as well, to what you do when you release your music, how it gets out there and all that side of things. So I'll get into the explanation of it. So here you go. This is the sheet that I'm using. I'm going to give you this to download for free. There'll be a link in the description. And as it says, it's questions and it's designed to actually help you make a plan. Now, you don't have to do this. There's no right or wrong way. It's up to you what you do, but this is a way to actually get an album done. And at least I hope that's what happens by the time we get the end of it, because I'll look like a right pillock if it doesn't work. But you know, we'll see what happens. So in general, I think you have to set yourself boundaries, because how many times do you sit down in front of a door and you do nothing because you don't know what you're doing, or you open a track and you end up changing like 2 little bits in the space of an hour or 2 hours because you don't have a direction, you don't have boundaries. Now, if you kind of if you confine yourself within boundaries, you can be a lot more creative. And there's a lot of things out there, you know, you look at Brian Eno's oblique strategies, that kind of thing. It's all about setting yourself, what am I going to be within, and within that you'll find you can be a lot more creative. So first thing is, what style you're going to do. Everybody thinks that they've got their own genre. Everybody who releases an album seems to think they've invented a genre. You haven't. Now, the other thing is that when you come to release your album, you're going to have to fit within an incredibly narrow definition of a genre. So you need to decide where you are, what you're going to be sitting around, and that also leads into the second part, which is what your reference tracks are going to be. So even if you're saying, oh, I'm going to be a bit like this or whatever, I'm not going to be like them, you need to think about, where are you going to sit on a streaming service? So if you make a track and you know that you're going to, say for example me, I'm interested in sounds that are quite deep, as I'll go a little bit further down. I've got my style, that what I'm going to do. The reference tracks, I've got 3 artists there. I've got Biosphere, AES Dana and Lossil. Now, artists that I really admire for the depth of what they do, things that are really the ambient side of these big, deep ambient sounds, and that's what I want to actually capture. So I haven't decided on specific reference tracks yet. Now, even if I make something which isn't like them, these are the tracks I want to be able to stand up to. They're the tracks I want to be able to see my tracks sound as good as they do in production techniques. You see, I've got quite a bit, like say this will be available for download, ideas on what I do and how I do it that makes the musical style, so not just the genre of it. So the next thing is the sound design. Now, this is incredibly important. You need to spend sessions on sound design. I'm going to show you a couple of bits that I've done now that I've just, what I'm doing is I'm starting a folder just for this album, forgetting about all the other things that I've got. And when I get something, I'm going to make a sound, save it within the album, and then I've got the sounds ready to use for that. And I can just dig straight in and I can make amendments to those sounds if I want to, but they're going to form the core, because they're all going to be about, what does the album sound like? So if I have, say for example, a string sound, something that's been a little bit destroyed, a little bit distorted, that's a core sound for the album. And using similar sounds, even changing them between tracks, it means that your album ties together as a whole. And I know albums aren't necessarily popular now, but they're probably going to make a comeback, because the way that the industry is going with streaming is just not sustainable. We're going to end up, people are going to get more attached to albums. I think, personally, that's my forecast. You heard it here, maybe not first, but several times. The next thing is about the theme of the album. Now, I don't have a story for this one particularly, but I'm looking at no story, but the theme is all about bringing the listener in, sinking you deep into a hypnotic, relaxed space. So I'm a big fan of Biosphere stuff. I love Shenzhou and that whole sort of really deep thing. That's what I want to do. I want to bring the listener in deep. Now, I am going to develop all of these things. This is where I am at the minute. So week by week, if I bother me arse to actually do it every week, on the update videos, I'll show you what I've done, how I've developed each section and how it's starting to move. So the next thing I'm looking at was the album journey. What am I doing? So the tracks need to tie together. How am I actually going to tie them together? Am I going to start off something up tempo? Am I going to start off with down tempo? Am I going to bring a little bit of rhythm in. What am I going to do? How am I going to actually, what's the mood going to be? How's it going to go? So the album journey I've got there is that I want to open it into a really gentle ease in something really, some maybe use that choral, maybe use some sampled strings with a bit of distortion, something just as a big space to bring them in. And then I want to start bringing in hypnotic rhythmic elements. So I'm thinking, right, I'll probably do that. Maybe the second track introduce a bit, the third track a little bit more. Probably not actual drums, but rhythmic things that are deep. And then the next thing we're looking at is the planning of the tracks. How many are there going to be? How long is it going to be? You know, it gives you a guide, because then you know, well, if I'm going to have 10 tracks, you can think, well, how am I going to plan the album around those 10 tracks? And if you if you knock it down by one or up by one, it's not a problem. So I've looked at 5 to 8 minute long tracks. Depends what happens. It depends where the track goes, what it feels like. And the whole album wants to be around about an hour, but maybe a little bit less. The main reason is just me just thinking about, I think you need a good length of something that's going to be ambient, something which takes you on a little bit of a journey. You need enough time for that journey to happen. And then effects, creating a bank of effects, because you don't want everything to be the same, but you want to have a thread running through it. So say, for example, that crushed effect that I've got, if you have some heavy compression there, it creates a sort of theme for it. And if I've got other things with a sort of real distorted thing and a lot of saturation, it creates a whole feel for the album. And you don't want your next track to have no saturation. You need a common theme to be passing through with it, because then you've got, you know, it's an album, it ties together and it feels similar. You don't want everything to sound the same, but you want to have a hook that ties through it, something where you know it's that same album. It feels like a journey. And if you kind of mess things up too much between tracks, you lose the journey and you just become a disparate collection of tracks that are just being thrown together. And personally, that's not what I want to do. I want to make a journey for somebody. So the last thing is learning. What am I going to need to learn to actually do the album? So you can see I've listed out in here the effects that I've got so far that I'm definitely going to be using for it. And I'm going to kind of put them into the folder again, and then just make sure that they all have a similar sound. So I might make some alterations to them, play around a little bit. So the things I want to do is depth and space and mixing. I've done quite a bit of that already on this sort of learning journey. Mastering, I haven't done any mastering, and I want to do my own mastering for this, so I want to learn a little bit of that. And then Ableton actually recently did a video with Reed Stefan, who does some awesome quality stuff. So I'm going to get a vocal chain, because I think I'm going to do a little bit of vocals myself on this. I'm going to do a little bit of singing, sample a bit of the singing. So I'm going to use that to create a vocal chain that works for my voice. And then once I've got that in on the vocal chain, I can start sampling, manipulating, playing around with it. I'm not going to use anything long. I'm not going to sing too much. I'm going to sing phrases. I'm going to use snippets. I'm going to use little bits. So that's everything. I'm going to be doing regular videos, showing you what I've done, how I've made it, how the album's coming along, and like I say, getting it all up to release stage and showing you how I'm going to release it. 'Cause it's not going to release as a whole album. It's going to be released gradually, and I'll explain to you what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and that sort of thing. So thank you very much if you made it this far. See you on the next one. Have a nice weekend. I mean, it's Sunday now, so have a nice rest of your weekend. Have a nice week and all that sort of thing. See you later.